Hello, and welcome back to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. My name is Cam, and today we will be reading Genesis chapter 32. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, on to the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau, Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now, and I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds, and the camels into two bands, and said, If Esau come to the one company, and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord, which saidst unto me, Return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies, and of all the truth which thou hast shewed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am to become two bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats, and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second, and the third, and all that followed the droves, saying, On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when ye find him. And say ye moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face, peradventure he will accept of me. So when the present over bef- so went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night, and took 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them, and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. Summarizing Genesis chapter 32. Jacob begins traveling home. 2 angels meet him. Jacob calls that place Mahanaim, meaning 2 camps. Jacob sends those messengers to Esau to check in because he left on bad terms, and he sends the messengers to communicate with Esau that he's coming back from Laban, he has cattle and servants, and he's hoping that Esau would be civil. The servants come back and report that Esau is approaching with 400 men, and they don't give Jacob any update on Esau's emotional status or intention. So, in verse 8, Jacob reacts in fear because he knows he did something wrong. He divides his people and animals into 2 groups in case Esau kills one of them off. Then he starts praying to God in fear. You told me to come here, God. I know I'm not worthy of your mercy and your grace, but you told me you'd multiply my seed as grains of sand. Then he took all these animals and he separated them into groups. He put servants in charge of each group, and then he sent them in waves, one after the other, with the instruction that each of these groups of animals are gifts from Jacob, who will be following behind. He's hoping that this will help Esau be civil to him. After he sent all of these animals, he sends his wives and his women servants and the children, 2 women servants and his children, ahead of him while he stayed behind. In verse 24, Jacob wrestles with the man, and when the man was losing, he dislocated Jacob's hip. The man told Jacob to let him go, but Jacob said, "No, not until you bless me." Bless meaning make holy, respect, glorify. And the man asked Jacob what his name was. And he told the man, who said that, "No, now your name is Israel." Since he's striven means to contend or struggle against. Since Jacob contended against with God and man and prevailed, finding success, his name is now going to be Israel, and Israel means to struggle. Jacob then asked the man that dislocated his hip and gave him a new name. "Well, now what's your name?" And this unnamed man doesn't tell Jacob, but he blessed Jacob/Israel. And then Jacob/Israel calls the place this all happened Peniel, 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 which means the face of God. And to this day, in verse 32, Israel's children don't eat the thigh tendon. That's what sinu means, is a tendon. Children don't eat the tendon because of this incident to this day, which is somewhat true. I don't eat the tendon of chicken. It's the meat I eat the most of. Sometimes I eat fish, but mostly chicken. So Jacob's first response to his brother coming with 400 men was fear because he knew he was wrong. But that could be intimidating anyway. But it's a different kind of fear when you know you did something wrong and then somebody's approaching you. He believed it was going to be conflict. And it even says in verse 11, he feared Esau might attack the woman and children. So he takes these groups of animals, he puts the servants in front of them, and then he sends them in waves and lets him know he's following behind. Then after he sends these animals, group after group of animals, then he sends a wife and women servants. And this Jacob's name means to circumvent. And this seems like Jacob is attempting to circumvent Esau's anger by buttering him up, sending him all these gifts, waves of gifts, and then sending the women and children before he himself approaches Esau. This seems to be the attempt because he even says he wants to find Esau's favor. Verse 22, the 2 women servants. It says that Jacob sent his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and 11 sons. The reason why this is significant is because these 2 women servants have names. In chapter 30, verse 43, Jacob increased exceedingly and maidservants and manservants. So that exceedingly has to be more than just 2. So this is why in verse 22, he most likely is talking about Bilhah and Zilpah. But this is a significant detail because women who enter into these arrangements as servants, even if it says in the Bible that they were wived, they still were thought of as servants. They were never thought of as wives. And when we look at the story of Hagar and Sarah in chapter 16, verse 3, Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham to be his wife. But as soon as Hagar got disrespectful in 16, verse 6, Sarah told Abraham, hey, this is a problem. And he said, do whatever you need to do with your maid. And then when Sarah sent Hagar out into the wilderness, chapter 16, verse 8, the angel called Hagar Sarah's maid. Even the angel. So in chapter 30, verse 4, Rachel's servant Bilhah was given to Jacob to marry. And chapter 30, verse 9, Leah's servant Zilpah was given to Jacob to marry, or to wife. And both of these women, Bilhah and Zilpah, they had children by Jacob. But when something went down, when it was time for them to be acknowledged in verse 22, in chapter 32, verse 22, Jacob sent his two wives and the two women servants. So this just demonstrates, at least for these two men, for Jacob and for Abraham, how a man meets a woman, how a woman enters a man's life. It may determine the status that they get or how he views them. And all the stuff that I am reading, this is an account of events, an objective account of events. And I want to do my best to summarize them without putting too much of my own opinion. I know there's no way to be completely unbiased, but the Bible is an account of events. This doesn't mean reflect anything about God's view on women. This is just how things were done. And when we look at this, if you look at Genesis 6, chapter 6, verse 6, look that up really quick. Make sure, I think it's right. I responded earlier, but let me just make sure. So chapter 6, verse 6, and it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. So Genesis chapter 6, verse 6, this is clear what God felt about something, because it said, and it repented God. It repented the Lord. It grieved him at his heart. This explicitly states how God feels about something. So unless the Bible says something like that, unless it explicitly states what God said, we can't look at it. It is not intellectually honest to read these accounts as if this is how God feels about things. These are the things that people did. This is a recording of events. And my goal is to read these things objectively, summarize them objectively, not make a judgment call or assign some morality to it, or insert what I agree with. I understand I won't be 100% unbiased, but to try to assign value or of these events, that's not the correct way to read them. Um, this is just a record of what happened. So another thing I would like to highlight is Jacob wrestled with man. This Jacob wrestling with the man, I always believed that Jacob was wrestling with an angel, but reading this again, I just wonder. Because when we look at Lot, right? Chapter 19, verse 1, two angels came to Lot, and they took the forms of men. And that term is interchangeable. Because when we look at chapter 19, verse 10, the angels are referred to as men. And this is when um, the men of the city were surrounding Lot's house, and they were going to break the door down. And the two angels pulled Lot into the home. So in addition to there being an annotation referencing verse 1 specifically, if that annotation was not there in the margin of the Bible, if we look at other translations, if chapter 19, verse 10, the Christian Standard Bible and the New Living Translation Bible, both of these versions, chapter 19, verse 10 refers to these two men as angels. So the term is used interchangeably, angels, men, because this is clear that they took the form of men, but they were really angels. so that there's multiple translations, and man and angel is used interchangeably there. This man and angel is not interchangeable here when Jacob struggled with man. When we look at chapter 32, verse 1, at the beginning of the story, two angels of God met Jacob. Every translation, chapter 32, verse 1, says two angels. In every single translation, two angels. But in chapter 32, verse 24, Jacob wrestled with a man. And there is an annotation in the margin of that scripture as well. And it's referencing Hosea chapter 12, verse 3 and 4. But I'm not going to read that until I get there. So hopefully, what I say right now is not too off of what it says in Hosea, but I don't want to skip ahead. I either want to reference material that I've already covered or just use the different versions to get the meaning out of this. But I don't want to go ahead of myself. So in every translation, the New Christian Standard, the New Living Translation, the NIV, the King James Version, the New International Version, that's NIV, all four versions references chapter 32, verse 24 as a man. There is no interchangeable uh, term used. It's not angel and man for some, like it was in the story of Lot. And then when we look at the story of Lot, these angels help Lot multiple times. But the angel, or I don't even want to call him an angel, the person, the man in chapter 32, verse 24, wrestled with Jacob all night, dislocated his hip, and then named him Struggle. So I just, I just wonder, like, it's making me question how I interpreted this earlier in life because I always thought this was Jacob wrestled with an angel. And even though in chapter 19 with Lot, the term angel and men was interchangeable, that's not the case here in chapter 32, verse 24, because every translation says Jacob wrestled with the man. And then in chapter 2, verse 1, two angels. If the term was really an angel, why would none of these translations say that there was an angel in chapter 32, verse 24? There were angels at the beginning, at the same story in verse 1, two angels of God. So when I just think about what actually happened with that man, that doesn't seem that that was an angel, but I'm not God and I wasn't there. But different interpretation after reading that. Thank you so much for joining me while I read and discussed Genesis chapter 32. I will be back to read Genesis chapter 33. I hope I said 32, but it's Genesis chapter 32 that I just read. I will be reading Genesis chapter 33 for the next upload. I hope to see you there. Have a blessed day.